Welcome, dear viewers. Before we begin, kindly subscribe for more true stories. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how your day has been. Now settle in. This one's unforgettable. They always said I was the quiet one, the helper, the glue. But the night my daughter-in-law raised a broom and my own son laughed, something inside me broke. Not loud, not messy, just a silent snap, like the last thread in an old sweater. And once it snapped, there was no stitching me back together. I knew something was off when she slammed the fridge door harder than usual. Not loud enough to shatter glass, but just enough to remind everyone who had the upper hand in that house. I was standing at the stove, stirring the green beans like I'd done 100 times before, my back aching from standing too long on those cold tiles. The casserole was already in the oven, the rolls rising under a towel on the counter, and the rotisserie chicken, bought, not made, was cooling off in its little plastic coffin. Linda walked in, keys still in her hand, sunglasses perched on her head like she was one of those women in a real estate commercial. She didn't even look at me. "Dinner's not ready," she said, checking her phone. "It will be in 5 minutes," I said, not looking up. I didn't trust my face just then. She sighed, loud enough to be heard upstairs, where the kids were supposedly doing homework but really yelling about whose turn it was on the Xbox. My son, Jason, wasn't home yet. Of course he wasn't. He never is when the air in that house gets thick. Like a dog that senses a storm, he disappears just in time to avoid the first crack of thunder. Linda dropped her purse on the kitchen table I bought them as a housewarming gift 6 years ago. Cherry wood. I remember because I dipped into my retirement savings for it. She never says thank you for that anymore. Not that she ever really did. "I've had the worst day," she said, as if it were an excuse for being cruel. Work was a disaster. The kids were animals this morning, and now I walk in, and this place smells like— what is that smell? "Chicken," I said, keeping my voice even. "And rosemary rolls." "I told you I'm off gluten." I blinked. That was new. Last week she scarfed down 2 bagels and half a cupcake at Sarah's baby shower like it was a sport. But I didn't say anything. I just turned off the burner and wiped my hands on my apron, the one with faded sunflowers and a bleach stain over the pocket. She leaned against the counter and muttered something about how I never listen, how I make things harder, how it would just be easier if I didn't ask to be here," I said suddenly, louder than I meant to. The words came out sharp, surprising even me. She stopped mid-scroll. "What did you say?" "I said I didn't ask to be here. You and Jason invited me after my lease ended. You said it made sense. You said the kids missed me." Her eyes narrowed. "And what? You think that means you get to run the kitchen?" "This is my house." I nodded slowly. "Yes, it is. But if I'm cooking, I get to decide when the damn chicken's done." The room went quiet. Even the kids upstairs must have sensed the shift, because their noise dulled to a murmur. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. And then she reached for the broom, leaning in the corner. It happened fast. I don't think she thought it through. She wasn't aiming to hurt me, not really. She just needed to prove a point. But the way she whipped it forward, handle first, the hard plastic smacking into the soft of my shoulder, that wasn't an accident. That was something ugly rising to the surface. Pain bloomed through my arm, sharp and immediate. I stepped back, gripping the counter. "Are you out of your damn mind?" I said. Just then, Jason walked in through the garage door. He paused, taking in the scene, me holding my arm, the broom on the floor, Linda with her lips tight and her chest heaving. "What the hell?" he said, half laughing. "What's going on in here?" "She hit me," I said, voice calm. Too calm, maybe. Jason looked from me to Linda. Then, God help me, he actually laughed. "Oh, come on, with the broom. Are we in a cartoon now?" My mouth dropped open. "She hit me, Jason." "You're not bleeding," he said, still chuckling. "Don't call the damn cops. Jesus. Nie dzwoni w 911, okay? Don't be dramatic." I didn't realize I'd picked up my phone. I wasn't planning to call anyone, not yet. But the fact that he even said that, "Don't call the cops," that told me everything. They thought I wouldn't. They thought I couldn't. Linda bent down, picked up the broom, and leaned it back against the wall, like she hadn't just used it as a weapon. "I'm sorry," she said finally. But her voice was flat, practiced, not an ounce of guilt behind it. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked down the hall to my room. It's not really a room. It used to be a pantry, I think. No window, just enough space for a twin bed and a dresser that smells like mothballs. My clothes hang on a rack Jason installed 6 months ago, when they decided the garage was too humid for storage. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress groaning beneath me. My shoulder throbbed. I reached for the jar of menthol rub I keep by the nightstand, the one with the cracked lid and the scent of wintergreen. As I rubbed it into the bruise, I stared at the wall. There was a time when I thought this house would be my peace. I gave them everything, my savings, my energy, my Sundays. I made casseroles. I drove carpool. I stayed silent when silence felt like betrayal of myself. I bent so much, I forgot what it felt like to stand straight. And now I'd been hit, laughed at, silenced again. But something shifted in me that night. Not big, not loud, just a flicker. A feeling I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. And I sat there in that tiny room with my bruised arm and my menthol-slicked hands, and I let it settle. I didn't cry. I was too busy thinking. The next morning, I didn't bother with breakfast. Normally, I'd be up before the kids, boiling eggs or slicing strawberries into hearts, because Ruby liked her plate pretty. But that morning, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the band of pale light creeping under the door, and I didn't move. Not when Jason knocked and mumbled something about school lunches. Not when Linda walked past humming tunelessly, like she hadn't whipped a broom at my shoulder less than 12 hours ago. Not when Ruby shouted "Grandma" from the hallway. Let Jason make their breakfast for once. Let Linda tie their shoes and pack their backpacks. I had nothing left in me to serve. Eventually, the house emptied. A door slammed, a car backed out of the driveway, and silence fell like a curtain. I waited 5 full minutes before I stood and reached for my cardigan. Blue wool, thinning at the elbows but still warm. The mirror above my dresser caught my eye. The bruise was spreading, darkening into something sullen and purple. I pulled my sleeve down. In the kitchen, the plate from last night's dinner still sat on the counter, cold and congealed. No one had bothered to put it away. That told me everything I needed to know about their idea of remorse. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the pot now bitter and overdone. I didn't bother with cream. As I stood there, the phone buzzed on the counter. Jason. Jason, hey Mom. About last night. Linda didn't mean it like that. She's just stressed. Maybe don't mention it to anyone, okay? Not sorry. Not how are you? Just a warning, dressed up like a request. I put the phone down and went to the bathroom. The mirror there was clearer. I leaned in and looked at the bruise again. I pressed on it gently, winced, still tender. That's when the real weight of it hit me. Not just the bruise itself, but the fact that I'd covered it. The fact that I'd instinctively tried to hide it, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I pulled my cardigan off, reached for the camera app on my phone, and took 2 photos, one with my arm hanging at my side, one close up. My hands shook, but I got them. I emailed them to myself, labeled the subject, November 7th, shoulder. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but I knew they might matter. Around noon, I sat on the porch steps with a blanket and a second cup of coffee. It was cooler today, the kind of crisp fall air that makes your bones ache in a way weather forecasters never mention. The neighborhood was quiet, suburban quiet. Leaf blowers in the distance. A UPS truck rumbling down the cul-de-sac. Somewhere across the street, a dog barked once, then fell silent. That's when I saw Grace, my neighbor. She was 78, with thin white hair and a back that made her walk like she was always leaning into the wind. We shared garden tips sometimes. She liked marigolds. I liked tomatoes. She always looked like she knew more than she let on. She waved from the sidewalk, then paused. "You okay, Evelyn?" she asked. I hesitated. Then I smiled, the way women of our generation are taught to smile when they're not. "I'm fine," I said, "just taking a break." Grace narrowed her eyes. "You don't look fine." I almost said something small, like just tired or rough day yesterday. But the words dried up in my throat. She nodded slowly, like she understood even without the details. "You know where I am," she said, and kept walking. Back inside, I checked the pantry. The bottle of ibuprofen was nearly empty. I hadn't slept well, and the pain was worse today. I swallowed 2 pills dry and sat at the kitchen table. That's when Ruby's voice echoed in my head from the night before. "Grandma, why is your arm purple?" She'd said it with wide eyes and concern, not fear, and I had shushed her, said it was nothing. Kids forget things, but not always the ones you want them to. Later that day, Jason came home early. I heard the garage door groan open around 3. He walked in, loose-limbed, his dress shirt untucked like he wanted to remind me how hard he worked. I didn't say anything as he rifled through the fridge. "You hungry?" he asked, like nothing had happened. "No." He leaned against the counter. "Listen, Linda's not doing great. Her boss has been breathing down her neck. The boys are a handful. And you've always been the strong one." I looked up from my tea. "Being strong doesn't mean I'm your punching bag." Jason winced. "She didn't punch you." I pulled back my sleeve, let him look. His face froze. "I didn't want to show you this, but now that you're justifying it." "I'm not justifying anything," he said quickly. Mom, come on. Don't escalate things." I stared at him. "What would you do if someone hit Ruby with a broom?" "That's different." It's not different at all." He rubbed his face. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." That was a lie. I did know. I just didn't want to say it aloud. He left after that. Said he had a call. Said he'd talk to Linda. I went back to my room. I pulled out an old shoebox from the closet, the one where I kept documents, bills, old insurance forms, birth certificates. I started digging. What I didn't find scared me more than what I did. The refinance papers from the house, gone. The copy of the joint account form, not in its folder. A tax document I knew had my name on it, missing. I sat back, my hands cold. They'd moved things. They were shifting the foundation under my feet without saying a word. And now my silence wasn't just dignity, it was dangerous. I reached for my phone, not to call the police, not yet, but I started making a list of everything they owed and everything I was about to take back. The list started small, just a few scribbled lines on the back of a grocery receipt I found tucked in my purse. I wrote down the obvious things first. What I'd contributed to the down payment, the cost of the new washer and dryer I paid. For last spring, when theirs broke, the monthly amounts I slipped into their checking account. When Jason's hours got cut and Linda couldn't be expected to downgrade her skincare routine. But once I started writing, I couldn't stop. I found a proper notebook, yellow legal pad, bought years ago for making holiday menus. This time, I used it for a different kind of preparation. I wrote down every expense, every instance, every time I'd stepped in, stepped aside, stepped up. Page after page, I was building a case, even if I didn't know who the judge would be. By Thursday, I was sitting at the local branch of my bank. A young woman with shiny hair and practiced politeness led me to her desk. Her name tag said Alondra. "I'd like to check the status of the joint account I share with my son," I said, placing my ID and bank card on the table. She typed briskly, her acrylic nails clacking like little hammers. "Okay," she said. "It looks like you're a secondary account holder now." I stared at her. "That's not right." When we opened it, I was primary. She turned the screen slightly toward me. It was changed 3 weeks ago. My mouth went dry. "Can you tell me who authorized that change?" She hesitated. "There's a record of an online request and a signature. I can print the authorization." She handed me a sheet with Jason's name typed neatly at the top. At the bottom was a scrawl that might have passed for my name if you squinted and held it at an angle. It wasn't mine. "I didn't sign this," I said. Alondra's fingers paused over her keyboard. "Would you like to file a dispute?" "Yes." When I walked out of the bank, the wind felt colder than it should have for early November. I clutched the printout like it might blow away and take my name with it. That night, I went online. It took a while. I'm not the fastest with the computer, and the county website is built like a maze designed by a drunk bureaucrat. But eventually, I found it. The property records. I typed in the address of Jason's house. My house too, in every way but legally. There it was, a pending transfer of ownership filed 7 days ago. My name was not on the new documents. My hands went still on the keyboard. I read the line again and again. Filed by Jason Ellis and Linda Ellis on behalf of Evelyn Ellis, per durable power of attorney. I sat back. Power of attorney? I'd signed something a few years ago. I remembered that much. After my hip surgery, Jason had brought over papers. said they were just-in-case documents, standard stuff. I'd been on pain meds, half asleep, and trusting, too trusting. I closed the laptop. The house wasn't just a house. It was the life I'd helped them build. The bricks I'd paid for, the plumbing I fixed when Jason said the handyman was too expensive, the new kitchen faucet Linda insisted on, but never thanked me for. And now they were trying to legally erase me from it, quietly, behind my back, with forged signatures and backdated forms. And the Broom, that was just the overture. The next morning, I took the bus downtown and found the legal aid office I'd visited once years ago, when I helped Grace appeal a Medicare denial. It was still there, still smelled faintly of toner and old coffee. I waited 40 minutes before they called my name. The lawyer was younger than I expected, late 20s maybe, sharp eyes, tightly coiled hair. Her name was Clara Shaw. "I need help," I said as I sat, "and I don't know where else to go." She listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't smile in that pitying way some people do when you're older and female and suddenly inconvenient. I told her everything about the joint account, the forged signature, the power of attorney I'd signed under medication, the Broom, the bruise. I showed her the photos, the bank printout, the pending property transfer, every receipt, every copied document I'd brought in a worn folder I once used for recipe clippings. When I finished, Clara leaned back in her chair. "You're not the first woman I've seen this week who's been turned into a ghost in her own home," she said, "but you might be the most prepared." I exhaled slowly. "We'll start with revoking that power of attorney," she said, already pulling up a template. "Then we file a fraud claim with the county clerk's office. And you're going to write a declaration about the medical state you were in when you signed anything." I nodded. "And Evelyn?" she added. "Yes." "You're not overreacting. You're under-defending." That night, back in my little room, I sat in the dark with the papers spread across my lap. It wasn't sadness that gripped me. It wasn't even fear. It was something sharper, something useful. I was tired, but I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. I spent the weekend at Grace's house. She had a spare room, the kind with a quilted bedspread and a ceramic angel on the nightstand. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet, and most importantly, it wasn't theirs. I didn't tell Jason I was leaving. I packed what I needed in a tote bag, my folder of documents, 2 changes of clothes, and the blue cardigan that made me feel like myself. I left before sunrise and didn't look back. Grace didn't ask questions. She set a cup of coffee in front of me and said, "Whatever it is, you'll handle it." I nodded. I didn't have the words yet, only the certainty that this wasn't just a break. It was a line being drawn. Monday morning, Clara filed the revocation of the power of attorney. I watched her tap at the keyboard, her fingers quick and precise. We sent certified letters to the bank, the county clerk's office, and, most satisfying of all, to Jason and Linda. I signed everything slowly, deliberately, my name strong across the page. "They'll know you've lawyered up by tomorrow," Clara said. "That's when the noise starts." She wasn't wrong. By Tuesday, my phone lit up with Jason's number. I didn't answer. Then a text, "Mom, can we talk?" This is getting out of hand. Out of hand, I thought. It had been out of hand the moment he laughed in my face. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. Wednesday morning, Grace was out at her bridge club, I was in the kitchen, flipping through the newspaper, when there was a knock at the door. Not a light one, not neighborly, firm, official. I opened it to find 2 police officers on the porch. "Evelyn Ellis?" the taller one asked, hand resting casually near his belt. "Yes." "We received a report concerning your welfare. A call came in stating you may be mentally unstable, possibly a danger to yourself or others." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I see," I said slowly. "May I ask who filed the report?" They exchanged a glance. "It was anonymous." "Of course it was." "Well," I said, stepping aside, "would you like to come in?" They entered cautiously, glancing around the modest kitchen like they expected to find something broken. I gestured to the table. "Please sit." The taller one spoke first. "Ma'am, we don't mean to alarm you, but we're obligated to follow up on reports like this, especially when there's mention of potential harm." "I understand," I said. Then I pulled the file folder from the counter and laid it on the table between us. Inside, photos of the bruise, bank statements, the fraudulent power of attorney, Clara's signed revocation letter, copies of my legal filings. I slid it toward them like a dealer laying down a winning hand. "I'm not a danger to myself," I said calmly. "I'm a danger to people who think I'll stay quiet while they erase me." The younger officer blinked. The older one picked up the revocation form and scanned it. "You have legal representation?" "I do. Clara Shaw, legal aid. She's expecting a follow-up if necessary." The older officer nodded. "You mind if we call her?" "Not at all. Would you like her cell or office line?" I gave them both. While they stepped outside to make the call, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. The mug read, "World's Best Grandma." It felt ironic, but I used it anyway. When they came back in, the mood had changed. More professional now, less wary. "Your attorney confirmed everything," the older one said. "Sounds like someone's trying to rattle you." "They should have tried harder," I said. "This isn't my first storm." They nodded and stood. "We'll make a note of this visit and close the complaint. But you should know, ma'am, people who make false reports like this, especially when legal matters are involved, they don't always walk away clean." I smiled, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. "I'm counting on it." They left, and I sat down, hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline. The gall it took to call the police on me, to try and paint me as unstable, as disposable, as if I hadn't raised that boy from the bones of my own back. I called Clara. "Just as we expected," I said. "I'll file an incident report to attach to our ongoing case," she replied. "They're escalating because they know you're winning." That afternoon, I took a walk through Grace's neighborhood. The leaves were turning, golds and rusts, and deep reds that made even the mailboxes look poetic. I passed a family raking their yard together. A little girl waved at me. I waved back. There was a part of me, for just a moment, that mourned what I'd lost. Not just the house or the trust, but the illusion. The belief that if I gave enough, loved enough, stayed quiet enough, I'd be protected. But that part was shrinking. And something else was growing in its place. I had lines on my face and arthritis in my knees, but I still had my name, my mind, my fire. Let them come for me. I wasn't just ready. I was armed. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because of anxiety, no, that had passed, but from something else entirely. purpose, that steady thrum of knowing there's still work to be done. Grace was already in the kitchen, barefoot and humming over the stove, like we weren't two women on the edge of a war the other of us started. "Coffee's hot," she said without turning. "You're going out today?" It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Bank first, then the county records office. Clara's filing the fraud petition, but I want to see the transfer filing myself." Grace didn't say much. She just handed me a paper bag with a sandwich and a thermos of soup. That's how we say I'm with you at this age. Food, warmth, quiet consistency. Downtown was already bustling when I arrived. The county building loomed like a mausoleum to bad decisions. Cold stone and tinted windows, and hallways that smelled faintly of floor wax and resignation. The clerk at the records office was a bored-looking woman with pink nails and the demeanor of someone who hated her chair. I gave her the address and my name. She raised an eyebrow. "You're Evelyn Ellis?" "Yes." She typed a bit too long for my comfort. Then she frowned. "There's a pending status on your property transfer, initiated electronically." Filed by a Jason Ellis using power of attorney, I didn't react. Not outwardly. Inwardly, my stomach tightened. "That power's been revoked," I said, sliding a copy of the revocation across the counter. "Here's the stamp from the notary. You'll also find attached a police report from yesterday regarding a false welfare claim. I'd like that added to the file." Her eyebrows went up, but she didn't argue. She took the papers, punched a few buttons on her screen, and said, "We'll flag the transfer for now." "Legal will contact you. Make sure they do," I said. "They might want to see the forged signature, too." "I've got the original." From there, I walked 2 blocks to the bank, my bank. I asked for Alondra, the woman who'd helped me the week before, but she was out. Instead, they sent over a branch manager. Young man, pale blue suit, tie with sailboats on it. "I'd like to place all my accounts under in-person only approval," I said. "No electronic changes, no phone transfers, no joint access, and I'd like to set a security password." He blinked. "Of course. Any particular phrase you'd like?" "Yes," I said, smiling tightly. "Tell the waves I remember." He didn't ask what it meant, just typed it in. We moved the bulk of my savings into a new account under my name alone. I left enough in the joint account to look passive. Let them think they still had time. But I printed every transaction from the last 6 months. There were transfers I hadn't authorized, cash withdrawals on days I wasn't even in the house, Linda's name on Uber Eats charges, subscription services I'd never heard of. My money slowly bled out behind my back. On my way home, I passed the old hardware store, the one George used to go to for everything from screws to paint samples. I hadn't planned to stop, but something pulled me in. Sam, the owner, looked up as I entered. "Evelyn," he said, surprised. "Been a while." We chatted for a minute. Then, as I was about to leave, he said something that froze me mid-step. "Say, someone came in here last week asking about changing the locks on your back door. Claimed they were helping you prep the house for sale. Young guy, clean cut, looked like your son." My hand tightened on the door frame. "Did he buy anything?" "Nope. Told him I don't change anything unless the owner asks directly." "Thank you," I said quietly. "Don't sell him anything, Sam." "Not for me." He nodded, eyes steady. "Ami wouldn't dream of it." By the time I got back to Grace's, my tote bag was heavier with documents and receipts, but my shoulders felt lighter. The fog was gone. The threat wasn't imaginary. It was real, calculated, and it had a face. Jason. That night, I spread everything out on Grace's dining table. Receipts, statements, copies of the power of attorney, the property transfer attempt, the police incident report, even the list I'd started in the margins of that old grocery receipt, a map of everything they'd done and everything I'd done since. Grace stood beside me, silent for a while. Then she pointed to the statement from the joint account. "That right there," she said. "That's your smoking gun." "I'm not trying to destroy them," I said quietly. "No," she said, "but you're going to stop them, and they won't know how to handle that." The next morning, Clara called. "They're trying to get ahead of us," she said. "Jason filed a motion to clarify ownership of the property. Says it's a misunderstanding." I laughed. I actually laughed. It startled me. "Good," I said. "Let's bring the misunderstanding to court." I wasn't done collecting, not yet. Next stop, the nursing home registry. I had a feeling my son's misunderstandings extended far beyond my house. The invitation came on a Sunday, a text from Jason. "Let's have dinner, just us, talk things through." No mention of lawyers, no mention of property or bank accounts or the bruise that had yellowed into something sour and silent on my shoulder. Just dinner, as if you could spoon gravy over betrayal and call it resolved. I stared at the message for a long time before I replied. "Fine, I'll be there at 6. Grace offered to drive me, but I said no. I wanted to walk in on my own 2 feet, under my own steam. I wanted them to see me arrive, not as a victim, not as some fragile old woman in a cardigan, but as someone who wasn't afraid to face what she'd unearthed. When I rang the doorbell, Jason answered. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from guilt. It was the tight, self-pitying kind, the exhaustion of someone finally feeling the weight of consequences he never expected to carry. "Mom," he said, like the words still held power. I stepped inside without hugging him. The table was set too neatly, napkins folded into little triangles, water glasses filled exactly halfway. Linda was already seated, wearing a turtleneck like she was hiding from something. She smiled, tight-lipped, strained. "Glad you came." "I'm not staying long," I said, "so let's not waste time." Jason sat down. "Look, we just want to clear the air." "Wonderful," I said. I pulled the flash drive from my purse and set it gently on the table, right next to the butter dish. "Everything's on here. Copies of the forged documents, transaction records from the joint account, the revocation paperwork, and the police incident report from your anonymous wellness check." Linda's face drained of color. Jason opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Save it." "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to tell you what's going to happen." The room went still. "I've retained legal counsel. Clara will be filing for a full investigation into the financial and real estate fraud you both attempted. The house is being flagged for contested ownership, and tomorrow morning my attorney is notifying Adult Protective Services. Not to protect me, but to ensure neither of you tries this on anyone else." Jason stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said. I let it get this far because I was too generous, too tired, but not anymore. Linda's voice broke. You're going to destroy our family. I looked at her, steady. You did that when you hit me with a broom and laughed. She said nothing. I stood up. I came to say goodbye. The sale of this house will be blocked until the courts decide. My name is still legally tied to it in more ways than one, and I intend to use every avenue available to make sure I'm not erased from what I built. Jason was staring at the flash drive like it might explode. I turned toward the door but stopped. I booked a ticket to Sarasota. One way, leaving in 2 days. I've rented a small place by the water. I always said I'd move there when I retired. I just didn't think I'd have to retire from my own family. You're leaving? Jason asked, his voice small. Just like that. Not just like that, I said. You made it very easy. They didn't follow me out. I don't think they could. The silence behind me was thick as syrup. Outside, the sun had begun to set, low in gold and indifferent. I walked to the Uber waiting by the curb. The driver, a college kid with earbuds in, barely looked up. That was fine. I wasn't in the mood for conversation. When I got back to Grace's, she was sitting on the porch, a blanket over her lap. How'd it go? She asked. They saw the fire, I said, and for once they believed I lit the match. She smiled. Good. That night I packed slowly, not out of sadness, out of ritual, folding the blue cardigan, slipping in the legal pad with the list, my testament, adding the flash drive, a photo of my late husband, the shell necklace Ruby made me. I didn't need much. The weight I carried was no longer in my bag. At the airport, 2 days later, I watched the sun rise from the window seat of a half-full plane, Florida-bound. The light stretched long and hopeful across the sky. They thought I'd crumble, but I flew, and I wasn't looking back.